At this exact day, on August 15th, 2023, this time last year, I was scared. I was scared that my brain wouldn't fully recover and that I wouldn't have the mental bandwidth to live my dreams and purpose, or even be the mom that I had strived so hard to be. I was struggling and I was deeply afraid people would find out that I wasn't the same person, that I was a shell of my former self. Now, looking back at this day in mid-August, a year later, I don't think that I would be doing all the things that I am doing today. And there's no words that can describe the deep amount of gratitude that I have for that. Because a lot of people who get hit in the head don't fully recover. And to be very honest, I don't think that I have fully recovered. Not entirely, but I am functioning 88% better than I was this time last year. And I want to share what I've been doing that has made a difference, despite the mold exposure that we experienced, the perimenopausal symptoms that I've had, and the increased inflammation, along with just struggling with a deregulated nervous system. And honestly, that has been an issue for me since I was very young. Now, I have done a lot over the past year to get back to my new normal. And one thing that I can tell you out the gate is that I have been consistent all year long. My desire to have mental energy, good word recall, and alertness has been more important than breaking my habits. My why is so much bigger than me, and it has been my why that has kept me consistent day in and day out for over 365 days. Now, before I dive into what I've been doing to reduce brain inflammation and really overall systemic inflammation, I want to quickly recap what happened last summer with my post-concussion syndrome. That was ultimately the diagnosis after I got hit in the head twice, pretty much back to back. So I want to back up to June 3rd, 2023, and we were at the beach playground in Laguna Beach, California, and I was helping my, at the time, 2.5-year-old climb up this metal ladder up to the second level so that he didn't fall. And once he got up to that second level, he ran over to the slide and he called me back to go down the slide with him. So I decided to literally pull myself and do a velocity jump up to the second level. See, I've been practicing box jumps for months, and I was feeling pretty darn confident that I could jump to the very top to get him and then slide down in just a few seconds. What I didn't know or didn't see due to wearing a baseball hat was that there was a metal bar about a foot above me, and I jumped with high velocity because I was trying to jump about 2 feet up to the second level right into this metal bar. And I hit that metal bar at the top of my forehead and immediately saw stars. Now, I didn't completely knock out or black out. Instead, I took a minute, made sure I didn't fall down the little stairwell. I steadied myself and I got to the slide with my son. And then I proceeded, because I knew I had hit my head pretty hard, I proceeded to observe my symptoms. I was nauseous, definitely a bit dizzy. I had, light was very intense for me, so light sensitivity, and I was pretty out of it for the rest of the day. Honestly, I also felt like my cervical spine had compressed because of the way I had hit that bar at an angle. I had a lot of pressure between my occiput and my neck, but I figured that my chiropractor in La Jolla could fix it. I was like, I'll just get to the chiropractor when we get home. Since we were on vacation, I kept up with my family and I played full out as a mama does. And the next day we were at Disneyland, and then it was Monday and I was back at work. Now, the following weekend, my period had started, and we were throwing a party for my son's birthday. It's his half birthday. So he's born in December, so we always throw a half birthday party for him in June. And I remember that everything that Friday, it was literally almost a week later, felt insurmountable. I was having the most challenging time doing the easiest of tasks, like decorating the house, going to the grocery store, getting the birthday cake, preparing for the party. Thankfully, my mom and Alex were there and they really stepped up. They could tell something wasn't right, because I was really having a hard time. And I don't know if this ever happened to you where you are used to doing things at a certain level, especially like, again, prepping for a birthday party, like just kind of knocking off the things off the list, but with ease, right? And then all of a sudden you can't do those things, not even just with ease, but almost not at all. And there's a level of frustration. I remember feeling so frustrated that I couldn't do what I normally could do with ease and grace. And so after that weekend, I knew that I needed to dive into what was going on with me. Like something wasn't right. But I didn't think it was the concussion. I thought it was my thyroid. It was my low levels of progesterone and testosterone that were throwing me off. I thought it was my hormones. hormones, obviously. You know, I knew it was the weekend that I just needed to get my labs done. And I was also weaning Kingston from breastfeeding. So there was a lot of things going on. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. But I knew that in order to get better, I was going to need to get some hormone support. Because again, I thought it was my hormones, and reduce my thyroid antibodies, which had been slowly creeping up for over a year. And I mean, besides lifestyle strategies, I wasn't bringing anything on because I was still breastfeeding. Now, I was convinced, to be honest, that it was due to a Hashimoto's flare up. If anyone's ever had Hashimoto's or low thyroid function, your brain just doesn't work that well. So I just figured that had to be what was going on. And at this time, I was already experiencing fatigue, brain fog. I had gained 4 pounds despite being on my detox protocol for 2 months. I had been walking 15,000 steps a day. I was resistance training consistently. I was going to bed early. I was optimizing my blood glucose. I was wearing a CGM, just like I'm wearing a CGM right now. I was taking a lot of supplements, and I was getting outside every morning. But I knew it had to be, like, I was like, okay, it's got to be my thyroid. It's got to be perimenopause. And maybe it was all of the overtraining I had been doing in the gym with my personal trainer. Again, I'm trying to, like, you know, when you're trying to parcel out, like, what is it? And again, couldn't have been the concussion, couldn't have been the brain, the hit to my brain. And I remember getting all my labs back at that time. And I'm talking all the labs. I mean, I ran everything: fasting insulin, full lipid panel, highly sensitive C-reactive protein, ApoB, A1C, I mean, name it, a GI map stool test, organic acid test, a Dutch panel. I mean, I spent like $1,000 on labs. It was very comprehensive and obviously very time consuming. So if you're ever wondering, you know, when I'm making these recommendations for labs, they're like, does she know how much this is? Like how big this is to do? Yes, I do. I get that it's time consuming and it's costly. But man, when you are trying to figure out what is wrong with you, when you're used to operating a certain way, to me, I am willing to do anything to figure out what's going on. And when I got all this back, I mean, to be honest with you, you know, when your doctor sends you home and everything's normal, well, guess what? A lot of things were normal. I definitely had low levels of progesterone, which is very, you know, very typical for, you know, a 43-year-old and, you know, a woman who's ending postpartum. I definitely had deregulated cortisol, but I've had that for decades. The thyroid antibodies were up, but everything else looked really, really good. And again, I just didn't factor in this concussion. So we ended up raising my Armour thyroid medication, and I decided to go on bioidentical progesterone and testosterone. And I added supplements to support my mitochondria, adaptogens to support my stress response system. I was meditating more. Like I was really adding a couple things in to stack in my favor. But despite all of the changes and assurances from my labs, I was spiraling in terms of my ability to function, especially my brain. The things that used to feel easy, as I mentioned, kept feeling harder. And, you know, for instance, a podcast episode that would normally take me 20 minutes to record was taking me over 3 hours with retake after retake after retake. You know, and this was the reason actually that the show it still remains at 1 episode per week, when at the beginning of last year, I was doing 4 episodes a week, 2 interviews and 2 solos. And then I experienced another minor head trauma on Thursday, June 22nd. So about, what was that? You know, 12 days later, I get hit in the head again. Kingston and I were playing in the living room, and Kingston flung back and accidentally headbutted me in the nose. And almost, you know, it's not clear that he broke my nose or not. My nose had been broken in that area from when I was a little girl, but he smacked into my nose with the back of his head, and the impact was so intense. I could barely see straight. I remember I was trying to collect myself from the impact and the pain. I was also trying to soothe my son because he saw my nose just blew up. It went black and blue, and I was dizzy and disoriented. I remember trying to get my husband to come downstairs to help me because I could not get myself together, and my son was very scared. And we almost went to the hospital because we thought it was broken because I was so swollen and so black and blue. Oh, it was so painful. I remember it taking weeks to stop hurting. And after that second hit, about 2 to 3 weeks later, I spiraled out of control. And I remember anything and everything, going to the beach, going to the park, everything felt like it was out of the question. I just couldn't do it. And I was beyond frustrated. And this is when the migraines began to start. Now, mind you, I had been having migraines. I started having really awful migraines in my pregnancy, but they were like maybe a couple times a month. I had 12 consecutive days of migraines that progressively got worse. I think they were literally building on each other until finally I was in so much pain. I was so disoriented that I went to the ER on July 8th to rule anything scary going on with my brain. I was like, my brain is broken. That's what's got to be. And I was there for 9 hours. I got a CT scan and there was nothing extremely scary going on, thank goodness. But I was diagnosed with a trauma brain injury and post-concussion syndrome. And I was given intense pain meds to break the migraine cycle. And I was sent home with all these pain meds as well, which I didn't actually end up taking. And it was very clear that I was dealing with the kind of the remnants of post-concussion syndrome, which is a cluster of symptoms that continue to linger when a concussion isn't quickly addressed, or multiple concussions aren't quickly addressed. So it's basically chronic symptoms. And when I came home from that hospital visit, I felt even worse. I was experiencing classic concussion symptoms: nausea and vomiting, difficulty concentrating, severe brain fog, dizziness, balance issues, fatigue, neck pain, migraines, headaches, insomnia, massive irritability, memory loss, especially word recall. I had no mental bandwidth or no mental energy. I was sensitive to light and noise. I could not drive a car. I could barely take a shower or get ready in the morning or make a smoothie. I couldn't help get my son ready in the morning anymore. This was, to me, like looking back, this was such a dark period for me. Everything felt insurmountable. And I was experiencing so much pain and pressure in my head, in my neck. It was just constant. So I immediately reached out to all of the functional brain and concussion doctors that I knew. And I started a concussion protocol that focused on quickly reducing the inflammation in my brain, along with addressing any leaky brain component. It was clear that my brain was on fire, and I needed to quickly reduce that fire if I was going to have any chance of recovering. And it's almost been a month since the first concussion. So I'm a month out and hadn't really done anything about it. If anything, I had been pushing against these concussions the whole time because I thought it was something else. I didn't know it was a concussion. So for the first 5 days, I was really only able to rest in a dark room and meditate and take my supplements, my concussion protocol supplements. My mother-in-law, who was an energy healer, started doing remote energy work on me for an hour a day. I think she kept that up for over a month, maybe even longer than that. And it was such a humbling and scary time for me because I felt hopeless and I felt alone in my room all by myself. I really wasn't able to leave the room very much. And it was so hard to not be there for my family, especially for my son Kingston, who I had been there for pretty much, obviously every single day since he was born. Now, for that protocol, it was a very extensive protocol, and I can actually link up to that full episode because, what I've learned over the last year in sharing my story on other shows or on my show or on Instagram is that so many people have dealt with brain injuries. Obviously, concussions, scarier than multiple concussions. And so I've shared a lot of what I did in that first 3 months. The first month and a half was a very intense protocol. I was on 9 grams of omegas. I was taking a lot of vitamin C, vitamin D, activated B. I was taking a bunch of brain support supplements. I was taking acetyl L-carnitine, which energizes the brain and increases neurotransmitter levels. I was taking lion's mane. So I was taking a bunch of different types of mushrooms, myo-inositol, digestive enzymes, polyphenols, liposomal glutathione, N-acetyl L-cysteine, so NAC as an antioxidant. I was taking 5 grams of creatine, which, by the way, I have continued to do so. And as I look at the list and I think about, wow, I was taking so much. There's a lot of things that I'm still doing. For this entire year, I've maintained, I'm not taking 9 grams of omegas anymore, but I'm taking 3 grams of omegas. And I've taken 3 grams of omegas pretty much every single day since I started this protocol. I take 5,000 IUs of vitamin D every day. I take 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C every day. I do glutathione every day. I do creatine every day, 5 grams. And I do all of this for my brain. I take myo-inositol for my brain and my blood glucose. I obviously take digestive enzymes. I take a probiotic every single day. I take a polyphenol blend, again, to reduce any type of inflammation. I also take a systemic enzyme every single night before bed. And I do magnesium. I remember I'm taking melatonin still. I'm taking progesterone. One of the most profound, things that I learned, and I had been knowing, but that progesterone is phenomenal. It's actually allopregnanolone in the brain, and it reduces inflammation and helps to, basically calm the brain after a brain injury. And so I'm actually taking a lot more progesterone today than I was, but I took progesterone for 3 months straight, continuous use to help reduce the inflammation of my brain. And so I wanted to share a little bit about, and then also at that time, I was doing cranial sacral, I was doing hyperbaric oxygen, I was doing acupuncture, I was doing brain retraining, going to a neuro brain retraining facility. I mean, some of these things were expensive. Some of these things were a lot easier to do. I knew that with post-concussion syndrome, but I had about 90 days. That's what the literature really indicates, that 90 days you have to really reduce that brain inflammation, or some of these chronic symptoms can stay. Now, as consistent as I was, I remember kind of my protocols, like the really big kind of the bulk of my concussion protocols kind of really slowed down in October last fall. And it wasn't until October that I felt comfortable being interviewed on someone else's podcast. And I remember giving disclaimers to anyone who was going to interview me of just like, hey, I'm still on the recovery of this brain injury. So I'm holding the vision that I'm going to show up, but I just want to give you a heads up that I may need a little bit of extra grace if for some reason I can't word recall. But I would say that I didn't start to fully feel like myself until January of this year. I just, despite how hard I was trying to feel better, I don't know if this has ever been the case for you, maybe even if you've ever had the flu, obviously, or had a really nasty cold like RSV or something, that you're just trying, like every day you're like, am I normal again? Am I better enough to go and do the things I want to do? And that's really what it felt like. Every single day I was trying to decide, am I good enough to get back to doing what I was doing? Am I good enough to build this program I want to build? Am I good enough to start writing my new book proposal? And it just, I had a lot of setback in this whole journey, because the one thing I've learned, probably the biggest lesson, before I get into some of the things that I did consistently over the past year, was that healing isn't linear. It never is. Healing is freaking hard. So if you're listening to this right now and you may be feeling overwhelmed with everything that you are doing and everything it's taking to get better, believe me, I get it. I feel this in my core. All this whole journey, this whole year has felt overwhelming. And there have been days when I have wanted to throw up my hands and not do all the things, because it's exhausting and time consuming. And sometimes it has felt like the results are slow, like the progress is slow. I know, if I always tell people, if I could wave a magical wand and just get you better, to get you more energy, to get you more mental energy, to reduce your inflammation, to help to, address the body composition changes and the perimenopausal rage and whatever the brain fog, whatever it is that you're dealing with, if I could just wave a magical wand, I absolutely would. But I know that it doesn't work that way, right? And so I want to share what have been some of the biggest components that I have been implementing basically since, I would even say since October, or even consistently. Like once I was able to really get out and start moving, a couple of my biggest commitments, my non-negotiable, is walking about 10,000 plus steps a day. I will say that I've taken so many solo walks multiple times a day, even if it's for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, if I'm lucky, 15 to 30 minutes, but just getting outside in nature, and getting outside as early as possible. Something about the sunshine, not gonna lie, I still wear sunglasses most of the time, especially on days when I have migraines. And I'll be honest with you, today I have a migraine, and I'm still doing this, right? So walking consistently all day. After I finish this, I'm going to be taking a walk, and that has been a game changer for me. So that not only for my mental well-being, my emotional well-being, I call it taking an emotional lap. Just having a minute to just recharge, regroup, re-regulate. Because again, at the end of the day, I am a mom to a 3-year-old, and he's living life for the first time, and there's a lot boundaries, and it's three-nager energy, and so there's moments where I just need to take a minute. Another thing that has been a non-negotiable for me is my supplements. So a lot of the supplements I mentioned, I'm still taking consistently every single day. The other thing that's been important is that I'm pretty much on a metabolically healthy protocol. And this is the protocol I share in my midlife metabolism and hormone reset program. This is going to be this will be a highlight in my perimenopause program, because at the end of the day, I believe that everything that we do is related to our cellular energy. And without that, without having good cellular energy, it's going to be really hard to recover the inflammation. Because if inflammation is cellular, right? If inflammation is at your mitochondria, it's affecting protein transcription, it's affecting cell to cell communication or hormone to cell communication. It is cellular. And if those little cells, the trillions of cells inside of your body that are making these decisions that allow you to feel emotions, to show up, to walk, to think, to have thoughts, then the epicenter of our vitality really is that cellular energy. And the biggest lever that I know you can pull besides movement and exercise is going to be what you put on your fork. And so my whole family, we eat very metabolically healthy, but my focus is prioritizing protein. So I aim for about 110 to 115 grams of protein a day, because that's that's where my lean body mass lands. I weigh about 115 pounds. I'm 5'2", 5'3" on a good day. I eat a lot of fiber, fermented foods. I drink a lot. I stay hydrated with electrolyte water. And I just make sure that I'm kind of hitting those numbers. I tracked a lot of my macros last year as well, just to make sure I was hitting those. But ultimately, the name of the game for me was, how do I reduce inflammation? My highly sensitive C-reactive protein was at a 1.8, 1.9. And although that's not super high, it's been below 1 for many years. And so I knew that I had an increase in inflammation. And yes, it could have been my brain. Yes, it could have been my Hashimoto's flare up, maybe the stress of my injury. I don't really know, but I knew I needed to get that under control. So what I ate and being very specific about what I ate was important. So things that were off the docket was added sugar, gluten, dairy, processed foods, seed oils. Those were big ones. And then, highly ultra processed foods, obviously really big. I'm trying to think of what else. Alcohol. I haven't drank alcohol in a very long time. I don't even remember the last time I had alcohol. It's been that long. So obviously, especially when you're trying to heal your brain, it's the last thing you want to do is poison it with neurotoxin, right? And so that has been a mainstay. That's been the way I've been eating, even before the brain injury, well into the spring of 2023, and especially have maintained that. And I will say that I have noticed, like, anytime I accidentally go off, or maybe we're on vacation and I don't know if something's in there, I will notice immediately. Like, if I accidentally get exposure to gluten or dairy, my body knows, and it doesn't love it. So that level of consistency for me is, I don't know if that's ever going to change. The other thing that became extremely pronounced, as my husband still co-sleeps with my son, and I was co-sleeping with my son up until I had those cluster migraines, and I ended up in the hospital. The second I got back from the hospital on July 9th, my son, he has his own bedroom. So my husband, Alex, sleeps with my son, Kingston. They've been doing that for over a year. There have only been a couple exceptions when we're traveling where we're all sleeping in the same bed. So I've been sleeping by myself for over a year in my own bed. And what the biggest disparity I noticed, especially when I was healing my brain, was how critical sleep was. And I remember needing about 9 hours just to not be in pain and not have pressure, not not be struggling. And that is, do I have a little bit of wiggle room now? Yes, I do. I would say in the last 6 months, I still clock at least 8 hours, 7.5 to 8 hours, because I find that if I don't get the right amount of sleep, my brain lets me know. It is so hard to function the next day. So what does that look like? My son is asleep by 8:15. Lights are off at 8. And then I am doing, just again, handling mom stuff, parent stuff, household stuff until about 9:15. I take my supplements. So I take my systemic enzymes. I take Inflammatone by Designs for Health to reduce any level of inflammation and antibodies, anything like that. So I love a good systemic enzyme with polyphenols. I take my magnesium restore. So I take about 600 plus milligrams. I take if it's in the second half of my cycle, I take 400 milligrams of oral micronized progesterone. I take Prometrium. And then I also take some minoxidil before going to bed. I take a little bit of melatonin, and I'll get into that in just a moment. I did it for my brain injury. And then when we had mold, melatonin is one of the best ways to reduce mold inflammation in the brain. So I'm still taking melatonin for that. I don't take melatonin for sleep. I take melatonin for reducing brain inflammation. And then I'm trying to think what else. I also take I take another 1,000 milligrams of omegas before bed. So I have a whole supplement nighttime routine that I take. It was more intense when I was dealing with my concussion full on, but it's definitely, it's still, I'm still taking some supplements before bed. I take those and then I go straight to bed. Like, I treat my sleep routine and my sleep like it is $1 million meeting that nobody can touch but me. The lights are dimmed. I'm off electronics, and I am in bed no later than 9:30, maybe 9:45. And lights are out. I'm usually asleep by 10:15, 10:30 the latest. And I'm typically up by like 6:30, 7 a.m. And I am consistent with that. I have found that if I'm mess with my sleep routine, the next day is really going to be a struggle. So that has been a non-negotiable. The other thing that really happened after the concussions, and I don't know if I feel like they exacerbated, was my migraines. So my migraines, they got pretty bad. I was having about 15 or so per month. And I will tell you that I was living in my own personal hell. And the reason why I talk in past tense is, like I said, I have one today, but I'm having like 3 or 4 a month. It's still 3 or 4 feel a little bit unreasonable, but not like it was where half of my month I was in so much pain I didn't know what to do. And so what I looked into for that was hormone replacement therapy. And so I am on an estradiol patch, continuous use, obviously. And then in the luteal phase of my cycle, because I have a 26-day cycle right now, I'll be 45 a week from when this goes live. I take 400 milligrams right after ovulation, whether I ovulate or not. So I track my menstrual cycle. And I always tell people, please track your menstrual cycle while you have it and track your symptoms. And the majority of my migraines happen in the luteal phase of my cycle, or the first couple of days of my period, heading into the follicular phase, So I take 400 milligrams of progesterone. That is a new upgrade. I was taking 200, and it just wasn't touching the migraines or some of my other symptoms that I was dealing with. A lack of stress resilience, again, the mental fatigue, the mood swings, the rage. So when I upped my progesterone to 400 milligrams, it's been about 2 months now, it has made a massive difference. Now, again, you always want to be working with someone who is hormone literate to figure out and titrate your dosage, especially in perimenopause, where things are constantly shifting and changing. So I've been playing with dosage of estradiol, and I'm also playing with dosage of progesterone. I feel like I found my dosage of progesterone, and for me, it was a higher dosage. Other things I'm doing is I'm meditating about 20 minutes or more a day. I went to an incredible Dr. Joe Dispenza advanced week-long meditation retreat about a month ago. And I had been meditating pretty consistently before that, but even in this last month and a half last month, it has made a huge difference in my stress resilience, my just calming my heart. And then I will say that, again, supplements have been a big part of this journey. I am weight resistance training again. about 6 months where I really could not lift weights except for really light weights. And I'm back to lifting heavy again. I'm doing that 3 to 4 times a week. Some weeks a couple of days less, some weeks a little bit more. I really base it on my cycle and what I'm capable of. And if I have a migraine, I use a lot of essential oils to kind of mitigate my migraine, but I also take Excedrin migraine to manage my migraines as well. I find that a lot of migraine medications just don't work for me. I wanted to share that. And then the other things that I'm doing, I think those were like my biggest non-negotiables, were the things I was sharing. Also, I mentioned we did have mold exposure in our house. And so for 3 months earlier this year, I was on a very intense mold protocol. And honestly, this is not the episode to go into all of that, but I have detoxed my liver and my gut to such a degree. It's pretty crazy. And again, staying on my metabolically healthy meal plan. I didn't really need to change any of that to be on the mold protocol. But basically, I was just trying to pull mycotoxins out of my system. Now, if you are concerned that you've got mycotoxins or you've got mold exposure, I always recommend testing yourself first and then testing your family. So I ordered a lab called Mosaic. It's from Mosaic Labs. It's a mycotox test. And you have to get it from a practitioner, but it can really tell you what's going on, and then you can go from there. And then ultimately, you would need to test your house too. And again, I'm not a mold expert by any means. I have a lot of friends that are mold experts, Dr. Emily Kyberg, Bridget Danner, Dr. Ann Shippey. And one of the things I'm gearing up for right now, as I'm sharing this with you, is I am interviewing like 40 people this month, the month of August. It's coming to a close, thankfully, because I am about to launch a Thriving in Perimenopause and Menopause Summit in October 14th to October 19th. And I've got Dr. Sarah Gottfried's on it, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, Dr. Casey Means, Dr. Mindy Pels, Dr. Suzanne Lentz, JJ Virgin. I mean, I have so many incredible speakers on this event, just rock stars, Dr. Tony Ewan, that I cannot wait to share with you. Dr. Felice Gersh. I mean, some of the biggest and just the best hormone doctors, the best metabolic and longevity doctors, on the best Hashimoto's practitioners. I mean, I am bringing it. I think it's over 40 interviews. It's all going to be free, but you can get an early access pass, and that's going to go live, I would say, in about 3 weeks. The promotional window for it is going to open so that you can sign up and register for free. You're also going to get an incredible a metabolically healthy meal guide as well, in case you're wondering, well, like, what do these meals even look like? I'm going to be making sure that you've got that information as well. So that's all coming down the pike. And this time last year, there was no way I would have been able to do any of this. And I'm just so grateful again that I'm able to interview at this capacity. Like, there are days where I'm doing 5 or 6 summit interviews in a day, and it's just mind blowing. So I would say the biggest levers for me that have made the biggest difference this year is, one, maintaining my healthy habits, maintaining my supplement routine, and bringing on hormones. Huge. So bringing on estradiol, bringing on progesterone. And I know you're thinking like, oh, I have a little bit of caution, I have a little bit of fear, and me too. I don't know if you were following me earlier this year. I had a breast cancer scare. I had a mammogram that came back with not good findings, and then I had a diagnostic mammogram that also queued up a biopsy, and it took months to get all of this, taken care of and all the screenings to happen. I remember my first mammogram was in January. I didn't get the biopsy until April. And luckily the biopsy in April was benign, but then there was a part of me that was like, oh, should I go on estradiol? I'm having these horrible migraines and my quality of life is not good. My brain feels like it's being scrambled, and I'm pretty sure it's not good for me given my post-concussion syndrome. Like, every time I have a migraine, I'm like, oh gosh, my brain feels like it is just being fried up. And so I'm willing to do anything. And I remember talking to 2 of my best friends about who, again, we all know hormones pretty well, but when it comes down to you, when it boils down to you, these beliefs and these fears, they start to perpetuate. And I've read Estrogen Matters by Avram Blooming. I've read all the books. I've interviewed all the people, And still, I think because of that biopsy, I was like, ooh, I don't know. And I remember again talking to a couple friends, and they were like, do it already. You have it in your house, it's ready to go. Start the estrogen therapy and see what happens, because that's the beautiful thing about it. If you are symptomatic, and my labs weren't really necessarily dictating it either. My labs pretty much looked okay, but my symptoms were really not great, right? Major mood swings, again, major days struggling with mental bandwidth and mental energy, migraines. I thought, man, I'm classically looking like I'm having low estrogen issues. And so I started taking, not a high dose of estradiol, but estradiol. And then I remember talking to another practitioner friend of mine who also has migraines, and she's had incredible success with higher doses of progesterone. And I thought, man, progesterone is probably one of the safest hormones you could ever take. And it is a freaking game changer. And the 200 milligrams, which is kind of the standard dose for women, just isn't cutting it. And you just have to know, like, you got to listen to your body. And it's so important that we have agency over our body. And I would say that's the other biggest lesson that I've learned here, is that there's a deep intuition inside all of us. There's a deep knowing, right, that something isn't right. And if there's anything I've learned from this entire experience over the last over 365 days, is that, man, I need to trust my gut. So when something isn't right, it isn't right. And so it felt like I was taking this 200 milligrams of progesterone, and I was like, man, it's just not, I was probably doing something, but not doing enough. I'm still struggling with symptoms. And when I bumped it up to 400, I was like, oh. And if you've ever taken hormones after you've had hormone depletion, whether it's low progesterone or low estradiol or even low thyroid hormone, when you hit that right dose, it's like the lights go on. I was describing it to, if you've ever seen Christmas Vacation, and he's counted all the lights. He's trying to get the lights lit up on the house, and finally, his wife flips the light switch, and the lights go on. And it is so bright. That's what I felt like when I got the right progesterone dosage, when I as I'm dialing the right estradiol dosage, it is just like a moment, right? And I will say the one thing I've noticed with the estradiol and the increase in progesterone is how much better my brain has been working. So hormones have made a huge difference, because I have been checking all of the lifestyle boxes off. I have been doing all of the, recommended supplements. I have been, increasing. I've been playing with peptides. I've been, I've been doing cold plunging. All the things, right? I was, even majoring in the minors. But when I was like, man, everything's dialed, my labs look dialed. And that's the one thing I will say, is that my labs have greatly improved over time. The last time I ran my labs was in March, and everything was in optimal range. And I was like, man, everything's in optimal range. I'm doing all the things. And yet I'm not feeling 100%. And I get that there's something to be said about the brain massively remodeling in perimenopause. And also something to be said about, a brain injury is a brain injury. Like, we don't know if people can fully recover. And so, there was a part of me was like, maybe this is as good as it gets. But then I was like, I could also take hormones and see what happens. And if they don't work over the course of a couple of months, I can stop and then start later when I start to see other symptoms arise. And I will say that, my starting the hormones this year, after again trying a lot of other things before I pulled the trigger on those, was the best decision I made. Increasing my progesterone to 400 milligrams, 12 days out of the month, and adding in estradiol has been a game changer. Also, again, I take Armour Thyroid. I have for many, many, many years. And, it's just something I'm going to always need to take, because, I have Hashimoto's, and my thyroid has definitely taken a hit because of the Hashis. And so that's what I really wanted to add, is like, one, what are the things that are working? Obviously, the mold detox was very helpful too. Being consistent with my lifestyle habits have been a game changer. That's kind of like my foundation. And then tweaking and playing with hormone replacement therapy has been huge. Now, I'm not sharing all of these things because I think it's the thing for you. By no means am I saying that. Every single one of us is on our own journey. Every woman I talk to in perimenopause has their own variety of symptoms, their own struggles. And yes, are there some underlying themes? Increased inflammation, deregulated blood glucose, maybe increased lipid levels. those can absolutely be addressed with a lot of the things I'm talking about today. But then when it comes to adding in hormone replacement therapy, you really do want to be working with someone who listens to you, who is able to look at all your labs, who is able to listen to your symptoms and really, go along the journey with you so that if something isn't working, they are willing to tweak it. You're probably not going to get it right the first go around or even the second go around. It's going to take a minute to get it right. And especially in perimenopause, as you are, shifting and changing throughout the different phases of perimenopause, if hormone replacement therapy is a yes for you, you're going to probably need to change it over time as well. And that's also for women who are in postmenopause too. So again, I'm really happy that I get to share some of these big updates and just share my own vulnerable experiences about what has occurred over this year, from brain injury to mold exposure to migraines and biopsy, which thank goodness was negative. It has been a whirlwind of a year. And when I talk to anybody and everybody, this has been a year of massive transition. And for many of us too, a lot of kind of health setbacks or just general setbacks. And so I wanted to share some of those big lessons that I have learned. What is working for me? What are the things that I am the most consistent on? And what I'm willing to double down, especially as I continue to move through perimenopause and beyond. What I know for sure is that I'm not going to get any younger, right? And there's a good chance that over time things are going to shift. And if I don't pivot along with the pivots that happen in my body, it's not necessarily going to be for the good. And so to me, being fully committed to my health, honestly, treating my health like it's another job and really listening to my body, pretty much daily moving forward, I think is one of the best things each and every one of us can do. And yes, wearables can really help. I love wearing a continuous glucose monitor, 3 to 4 times a year. I love tracking my steps with a Whoop, with a Fitbit. I love looking at my heart rate variability and my body recovery score and my sleep score on a Whoop strap or an Oura ring. I think this kind of information is really important, especially as our brains are remodeling in perimenopause and beyond, and as our bodies are shifting and changing, and we need to be on top of those biomarkers. And so again, this is a lot of what I'm going to be talking about, what I'm going to be interviewing about inside of the Thriving in Perimenopause and Menopause Summit with literally some of the biggest New York Times bestselling authors, some of the biggest experts in the world, really speaking on how do we build power and resilience and longevity? How do we bridge the lifespan versus health span gap for women in perimenopause and beyond? And what I want to end with is that at the end of the day, it is really up to each of us to own our health, no matter how hard that is. It's really the only way through, right? We have to have agency for our health and our body. And if there's one thing that I want you to get from this, is that commitment, being consistent day in and day out. That is the ultimate currency. That is compounding interest in your health bank account. Now, I am holding the vision for myself to be a woman who is firing on all cylinders, who's got energy, and who is doing life with a lot of ease and grace. And I am holding and sending you that extra grace as well. And I am holding you in perfect health too. And so I hope this interview was well, not interview, I hope this solo episode was helpful to kind of just get a peek into what my life has looked like, what the challenges has looked like, what I'm doing to mitigate those challenges, and that from the deepest part of my heart that I am here for you, that I am here with you, and that I am always cheering you on. If this episode was helpful at all, please subscribe to the show. Take a moment and rate it, and be on the lookout for the registration link for the Thriving in Perimenopause and Menopause Summit. I promise this is an event you are not going to want to miss. We're going to have well over 75,000 women attending. The last time I did an event like this, we had 95,000 women attending. I'm expecting very close to that number because I want to create community. I want to create a movement. I want us to be able to stand together and hold each other as we are navigating these big changes in our lives. Until the next episode, have an amazing day.